A paralyzed woman found herself alone at a cafe on her first date. Then a stranger, a CEO with his young daughter, walked up and changed everything. Blair Whitmore had spent nearly an hour getting ready. Her light blue dress was soft and simple with small cap sleeves and a sash that tied at the waist. She wore just a touch of neutral but warm lip color, and her long blonde hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. It had taken her longer than usual to get everything just right, to steady her hands enough for mascara to sit perfectly in front of her full-length mirror. But she had done it. She had allowed herself to feel something akin to hope. This was her first date in nearly 2 years. The cafe was small, nestled between a bookstore and a florist in downtown Portland, with ivy curling along the windows and the thick scent of cinnamon and coffee filling the air. Blair wheeled herself through the front door 10 minutes early, her heart pounding beneath her dress, and chose a table near the window. She adjusted her posture, placing her hands gently in her lap, and glanced at her phone again. He was late only by 5 minutes, then 10. She kept smiling even when her hands began to feel cold. Finally, a man walked in, tall and neatly dressed in a button-up shirt and dark jeans, with a watch that gleamed under the cafe's lights. He looked around briefly before his eyes landed on her. Blair smiled, raising a hand slightly. He stopped. His eyes dropped from her face to the chair she was seated in her wheelchair, then back up again as if he needed to confirm what he was seeing. His jaw tensed, his entire posture shifting from casual to visibly uncomfortable. "Are you Blair?" he asked, not sitting down. "Yes," she said, her voice calm despite the tremor in her fingers. "It's nice to meet you." He blinked, then said, not quietly, "I thought you could walk. This is a lie." Blair's breath caught. Several heads turned. The barista behind the counter froze mid-pour. A couple at the next table went silent. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Her cheeks flushed with heat, but she kept her back straight. I never lied," she managed, her voice low. "It's in my profile. I just thought—" "No," he said sharply, waving a hand. "This is not what I signed up for." He laughed once, dry and bitter, then shook his head. "I cannot believe this. You should have said something. This is misleading." Blair's throat tightened. "I'm not broken," she whispered, but he was already reaching for his wallet. He threw a $10 bill onto the table as if it would cover the damage, muttered, "I'm not doing this," and walked out, leaving her sitting there alone. Silence fell. Blair stared down at her hands in her lap, willing them to stop trembling. Her spine felt stiff cold. She kept her face still, her eyes dry, refusing to let herself cry. Not here, not in front of strangers. She adjusted her position, lifted her chin, and tried to breathe. And then a soft voice broke the silence. "Daddy, why is that lady sad?" Blair looked up, startled. A little girl stood a few feet away, wearing a pink dress with white flowers and sparkly sneakers. Her golden curls bounced as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. In her arms, she held a stuffed animal, something between a bunny and a unicorn. A man crouched beside her, tall and broad-shouldered in a dark coat. His hair was chestnut brown, with just a hint of gray at the temples, his eyes steady and kind. He followed his daughter's gaze toward Blair. The girl tugged on his sleeve again. "Can we help her?" Blair felt her breath hitch. The man stood, offering Blair a gentle smile as he stepped toward her table. His voice was warm, but not intrusive. "Do you mind some company?" he asked softly. "Rosie's pretty good at cheering people up." Blair looked at the man, then at the little girl Rosie, who now smiled shyly and waved. For a moment she could not speak, but the weight in her chest, the humiliation still raw from only minutes ago, began to ease just slightly. She nodded. "Sure," she said quietly. "I'd like that." Rosie climbed onto the chair opposite Blair without hesitation, her tiny legs swinging as she scooted close to the table. She placed her stuffed unicorn on the seat beside her, then rummaged in her small, glittery backpack and pulled out a sheet of stickers. "These are my sparkle stars," she announced. "Do you want one? You look like a sparkle person." Blair blinked, caught off guard by the girl's energy, but she found herself smiling. a real involuntary smile that softened her cheeks and eased the tightness in her chest. "I'd love one," she said. Rosie peeled off a bright pink star and reached across the table. Blair leaned forward and let Rosie place it gently on the back of her hand. "Perfect," Rosie declared. "Now we match." She showed Blair her own hand, 3 sparkle stars in a row, one of them smudged with chocolate. "You want a cookie, I can share mine. Daddy says sharing is the fastest way to make a friend." Blair glanced at the cookie, half-eaten and crumbling at the edges, and gave a small laugh. "Thank you. Maybe just a little piece." Rosie tore a piece off and carefully placed it on a napkin in front of Blair. The child's kindness, so natural and unfiltered, began to melt the heaviness Blair had been carrying since the moment she'd rolled into the cafe. Across the table, Owen sat down slowly, his movements calm and unhurried. He gave Blair a small smile, reassuring, not pitying. "You don't have to explain anything," he said quietly. "But you also don't deserve what he did." Blair met his gaze. She expected discomfort, or maybe that overly sympathetic tone people sometimes used when they didn't know what to say. But there was none of that in Owen's voice, no awkwardness, no condescension, just quiet sincerity. "Thank you," she said. Her voice cracked slightly, so she cleared her throat. "It's not the first time, but it still hits like the first time." Owen nodded once. "I'm sorry that it has to hit at all." There was a pause, gentle, not strained, just the rhythm of people settling into unexpected company. Blair watched as Rosie began lining up sugar packets like dominoes. The little girl hummed to herself, her pink dress crinkling every time she moved. Her joy was contagious light spilling into the space that had just held shame and silence. "She's sweet," Blair said softly. "She's everything," Owen replied. A softness in his voice that comes from somewhere deep keeps me grounded, reminds me every day that life is still good. There was something about the way he said it, something in the way his eyes lingered on his daughter, tender but tinged with a quiet ache. Blair tilted her head slightly. "Her mom—" Rosie looked up, just then, her voice piping in before Owen could respond. "My mom's in heaven," she said matter-of-factly. "But Daddy says kind people make her smile from the clouds." Blair felt her breath catch. Her chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with discomfort and everything to do with how deeply those words struck. She looked at Owen, startled. He nodded, not saying anything at first. Rosie continued unfazed. "So, when we see someone nice, or someone being brave, Daddy says, 'Look up, Rosie, Mommy's smiling.'" Blair's throat closed around something unspoken. She placed a hand over the pink sticker Rosie had given her, as if to hold it in place and maybe to hold herself in place too. "That's beautiful," she said after a moment. "And she must be smiling a lot." Rosie grinned. "Especially when I share cookies." Owen smiled faintly but didn't interrupt. His eyes were on Blair, studying, steady but kind. And Blair, for the first time that day, felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just the comfort of not being judged. It wasn't just a child's innocent acceptance. It was being seen fully, plainly, and not turned away. She looked at Rosie again, then back to Owen and said quietly, "Thank you for not looking away." Owen's response was simple, but it meant everything. "I wouldn't." The late afternoon sun had turned the sky into soft gold when Owen asked, "Would you like to take a walk? There's a small park just a block away. Rosie likes the bubble station there." Blair hesitated. The wheels of her chair were still angled from how she'd positioned herself to leave after the date back when she thought she'd be rolling away alone. She glanced at Rosie, who was now showing the barista her glitter stickers, then at Owen, whose offer wasn't filled with pity, just a quiet invitation. "I'd like that," she said finally. The park was small but peaceful, tucked between 2 rows of trees turning orange with fall. The path curved gently through patches of wildflowers and playground spaces. Rosie ran ahead, her pink dress fluttering, waving a tiny bottle of soap bubbles she'd been gifted by the cafe staff. "Daddy, look, I'm going to make the biggest one." Blair wheeled alongside Owen, her hands steady on the rims, her posture straight. The silence between them was calm, not heavy, just two people sharing space in the company of a child's laughter. "So," Owen began softly, "what do you do when you're not enduring terrible first dates?" Blair let out a small laugh. "I'm a freelance illustrator, children's books mostly. I like drawing worlds where no one ever gets left behind." Owen's eyebrows lifted. "That's unexpectedly perfect." Blair glanced at him. "And you?" "I run a health tech startup," he replied. "We're working on adaptive mobility solutions, things like smart prosthetics, chair-integrated sensors, that sort of thing." Blair raised an amused eyebrow. "You're either very committed to your job or this is an elaborate coincidence." Owen chuckled. "I'll admit it's more of a mission than a job." They stopped near a bench as Rosie ran toward the grass bubbles trailing behind her like fairy dust. Blair watched her for a moment, then looked down at her own hands in her lap. "It wasn't always this way," she said quietly. 3 years ago, I was training for nationals gymnastics. Beam was my specialty. I'd done that routine 100 times. Owen didn't say anything, just waited. Blair inhaled. "One landing went wrong just slightly. My heel slipped on the dismount. I remember the pop in my back before I even hit the mat, then nothing from the waist down." Owen's expression didn't change, not in a way that made her feel small or pitied. His gaze remained steady. She continued, voice softer. "People kept saying, I was strong, brave, inspiring, but none of them stayed long enough to see what came after the surgeries, the depression, the fact that some days getting out of bed felt like an Olympic event." Owen's voice was low. "But you did get out of bed." Blair looked at him surprised. "I did," she said, "eventually because I realized I wasn't broken, just rewired." There was silence for a beat. Then Owen said, "I think that's called strength." Blair blinked, startled by the simplicity of the compliment. No fanfare, no exaggeration, just truth. She smiled this time, not out of politeness, but something real, something from deep inside. "I've been trying to believe that again," she said. He glanced at her hands resting on the wheels. "You make it easy to believe." Just then Rosie called out, "Look, look," and ran up with a huge wobbly soap bubble hovering beside her. It floated a few inches above Blair's lap, catching the sunlight and reflecting every shade of the sky. Blair laughed, a sound Owen hadn't heard from her before light unburdened full. Rosie squealed and clapped. "You smiled, that means I win." Blair reached out and popped the bubble gently. "You definitely win." Owen stood beside her, watching them both. And for the first time since the accident, Blair realized she didn't feel like someone needing to be rescued. She just felt seen. The cafe had become their quiet meeting place. It wasn't planned, just a natural rhythm that formed after a few shared walks and unhurried conversations. Every few days, Blair would receive a text from Owen, "Café at 400. Rosie insists the hot chocolate here is magic." And somehow Blair always said yes. This time, Rosie was with her grandmother, giving Blair and Owen an unexpected pocket of time. The cafe windows fogged softly from the cold outside, and Blair sat across from Owen, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea, steam brushing her cheek. Owen had brought his iPad, reviewing a few presentations for a pitch the next morning. "I can be boring for 15 minutes?" he asked with a smile. "Then I'm all yours." "Deal." Blair grinned. "As long as you let me steal a cookie." "Done." She reached for the plate as he swiped through project slides, charts, budget allocations until one slide caught her eye. It was titled Neuromotion Rehabilitation Grant Phase 2 Implementation. Underneath a logo she knew by heart, Harbor Light Recovery Center. Her breath caught. "That's..." She leaned in, eyes narrowing. "That's the facility I was in." Owen paused mid-swipe. "Really?" Blair nodded slowly. "That's where I spent nearly a year. That new aquatic therapy wing, it's in that proposal." Owen sat back, a look of dawning realization coming over his face. "That was one of our first investment rounds. We pushed the board hard on it. A lot of people didn't see the value." She looked at him. "But you did." He met her gaze, serious now. "Yeah, I did." There was a quiet moment, something thick in the air between them. Not tension, but the gravity of something important. Blair asked gently, "Did you know I was there back then?" Owen shook his head, his voice quiet. "No, I didn't." A pause. "But I'm glad you were." Blair looked down, then smiled softly. "That place, it changed everything. Without the underwater treadmill, I would have never regained core balance. I couldn't sit without a harness for 6 months. And then one day, I didn't need it anymore." She looked up at him again, her eyes shining. "That wing gave me hope." Owen exhaled, leaning forward. "That's why we do it. That's what it's supposed to be about. Not just margins and market impact, but stories like yours, people like you." "I never thought I'd meet the man behind the check," she said lightly, but something about the words stuck in the air. "And I never thought I'd share a cookie with someone whose life I accidentally helped rebuild." They both laughed softly, but neither looked away. It felt strange, this quiet, shared past that neither had known was shared until now, like 2 pages from the same book finally sewn into the same chapter. The rain tapped gently at the window. Owen's fingers drummed once on the tabletop. "I keep thinking about that day," he admitted, "when Rosie asked why you looked sad." Blair smiled, glancing out the window. "She didn't see a wheelchair, just a person. She's good at that," Owen said. "She doesn't see limits, just people worth knowing." Blair stirred her tea. "I think maybe that's the real therapy, being seen. Not as the injured one or the strong survivor, but just Blair." "You are Blair," Owen said, long before and long after the chair. "That never changed." Something inside her loosened at that, not because it was poetic, but because he meant it. And suddenly that coffee shop didn't feel like a temporary stop between old pain and new fears. It felt like the beginning of something that saw both and stayed. It was a Sunday morning when Owen invited her. "I was thinking," he said casually over their cafe table, "you and Rosie might want to come by the house, the backyard. It used to be a garden, my mom's. She loved it." Blair looked hesitant. "I'd love to, but does your place have stairs at the entry?" Owen hesitated for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but Blair caught it. 3 steps, he admitted, "just at the porch." She gave a small smile, not bitter, just real. "I can't do steps, not without help. Most homes weren't built with people like me in mind." "I get it," he said quickly. "Another time then." She nodded politely, but something in her eyes dimmed. He saw it, and he didn't like it. That night Owen couldn't sleep. The image of her smile, bright but pulled just a little too tight, wouldn't leave him. Around midnight he made a few calls, messaged a friend who did custom woodworking, and cleared his morning. By dawn, a simple wooden ramp, smooth, sturdy, and just wide enough, sat waiting against the front steps of his porch. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't permanent, but it was a welcome. When Blair arrived later that day, Rosie rushed to greet her first, her pink dress flaring as she bounded down the walk. "You came. Daddy made muffins, I helped." Blair smiled at her joy, but her eyes caught something else, something that made her breath hitch. The ramp, unpainted fresh wood, slanted perfectly from the curb to the porch. She blinked slowly. She wheeled closer, touched it with her fingertips like it wasn't real. Owen stepped out, then wiping his hands on a dish towel. He didn't make a big deal of it. Didn't draw attention. "Morning," he said simply. "It's not much, but I figured you shouldn't have to go around or be carried." Blair looked up, eyes glassy. No words, just a long, quiet look like he'd just touched something no one had before. "Thank you," she whispered, voice thick. Owen shrugged, voice low. "It's your Sunday too. You deserve to come through the front door." The backyard was bathed in soft gold light, late morning sun streaming through old maple branches. The garden had grown wild since his mother passed, lilies tangled with weeds, rose bushes reaching in every direction. But something about the chaos was beautiful, alive. Blair rolled over the stone path Owen had widened just that morning, her wheels crunching lightly over fallen petals. Rosie darted ahead, spinning in circles near a forgotten patch of lavender. "This place," Blair whispered. "It's like a secret, a quiet one. My mom used to say," Owen said, stepping beside her, "that every flower is a second chance." Blair smiled at that, her fingers brushing the edge of a bloom. Just then Rosie appeared with a small clay pot in her hands. Inside, a bright purple pansy swayed gently. She walked straight to Blair, placed it gently into her lap, and beamed. "This flower needs you," she said with perfect seriousness. "Like we do." Blair froze. Owen watched her closely as her hands tightened slightly around the pot. She looked down at the little plant, and for a moment, nothing moved. Then her voice broke. "You're something else, Rosie." Rosie grinned. "I know." They sat for a while. Blair in the sun-dappled shade. Rosie tugging at Owen's sleeve, asking for more muffins, more flowers, more everything. And Blair, she didn't just feel welcome. She felt rooted. Like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the one being given a second chance. Maybe she was one. Blair had worked for months to prepare the gallery. Each painting was a piece of her layers of color that masked years of pain, recovery, and rediscovery. Abstract bursts of movement, bold strokes, quiet grief captured in oils and acrylics. The exhibition was titled Rewritten because that was what she'd had to do with her life. That night the gallery was full. Warm lighting glowed across white walls. Strings of jazz floated in the background. Owen arrived with Rosie, who wore a velvet pink dress and immediately declared the buffet table the best part of grown-up events. Blair greeted them with a radiant smile. Her blonde hair was braided to one side, eyes lit up not with nerves, but pride. "I had no idea you could paint like this," Owen said, stopping in front of a piece filled with swirling blues and fractured gold lines. "I couldn't," she said. "Not until after the chair." "Does it help?" She nodded. "It lets me move in a different way." For a while, everything was perfect. Blair glided between conversations, gracious and poised. Owen stood nearby, keeping Rosie in line and occasionally stealing glances at her, the way she laughed now, unguarded, like someone learning to breathe again. Until it happened. Two women in cocktail dresses were standing near one of Blair's larger canvases. Owen wasn't eavesdropping. He just heard the words as he passed to get Rosie more juice. "That's sweet," one woman said, her voice laced with patronizing charm, giving her a purpose again. "Men like that always need a little redemption project." Owen froze. He turned slowly only to see Blair not far behind them, having heard the exact same thing. Her expression didn't change immediately. But her eyes, those open, expressive eyes, closed off. Her spine straightened, her hands tightened against her wheels. She turned and rolled away from the group, her shoulders drawn tight like armor. Owen followed. "Blair." "I'm fine," she said flatly. They stepped out onto the gallery's back terrace. It was quiet out here, just the sounds of the city echoing in the distance. Blair stared out at the skyline. "I've heard worse," she added. Still, they didn't know what they were talking about. She turned to look at him. "Didn't they?" That caught him. "Blair, you don't have to explain," she cut in. "I know I'm a lot of story, a symbol. People love symbols. I don't see you as a symbol. I know you're kind, Owen. You and Rosie, you came into my life when I least expected it, but sometimes I wonder." She swallowed. Her voice was quiet. "I wonder if this is about me or about what I make you feel. Useful. Good." The words hung between them like smoke. Owen didn't know how to answer because a small part of him had felt that like helping Blair somehow helped himself, like showing up made him a better man. And that part of him hated it because he didn't want her to be a redemption arc. He just wanted her. Blair gave him a soft, sad smile. "You don't need to fix me, Owen. I'm not broken. I just need to know I'm not someone's second chance." And with that, she turned back toward the gallery. In the days that followed, Blair grew distant. Texts became polite. Calls went unanswered. Owen didn't push. He spent more evenings in silence staring at the little painting Rosie had made with Blair finger-painted flowers and stars. One night, Rosie shuffled into the room after bedtime, a piece of folded paper clutching in her hand. "I made something," she whispered for Blair. He opened it, a crayon drawing of a girl in a wheelchair with long yellow hair sitting beside a garden. Next to her was Rosie with her usual big smile and Owen holding a heart between his hands. Above it in Rosie's careful handwriting, "Dear Blair, I think you're magic, but Daddy's sad without you. Please come back." Owen stared at the note, and for the first time, he didn't feel like the one offering healing. He felt like the one needing it from her. The apartment was almost empty. Blair rolled quietly across the hardwood floor, scanning the few remaining boxes stacked near the door. Her art supplies were packed. The walls, once full of color and sketches, stood bare. Portland had given her so much pain-healing rediscovery. But it was time to leave. A gallery in Santa Fe had offered her a residency, a new start, a quieter life somewhere no one would look at her and see a story, or worse, inspiration. She didn't say goodbye to many people. Not to Owen, not to Rosie. She told herself it was easier this way. The morning she planned to leave, the sky was gray, soft rain dusting the sidewalks like a sigh. Blair opened the front door to bring the last box down, only to pause. There was something on her doorstep, a wooden box polished smooth with her name engraved in cursive on the lid, Blair Whitmore. She hesitated, heart already thudding. Inside, she found a stack of beautifully bound books, children's books illustrated, and they were hers. Her characters, her drawings, her stories, ones she'd scribbled in notebooks and hidden away. Silly tales about garden fairies and adventurous cats, brave girls in wheelchairs who tamed dragons and flew hot air balloons made of dandelions. But now, printed, colored, real. There was a small envelope tucked beside the books. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a handwritten note. Blair, I found the sketches in the folder you left behind. They weren't unfinished. They were waiting to become something more. I showed them to our children's publishing team. They fell in love. We printed a small run. Rosie insisted on reading every one before bed twice, sometimes 3 times. She thinks the dragon and the girl with wheels and wings is me. I think she's right. You didn't just inspire me, Blair. You inspired a world I didn't know I needed. Please don't leave it. Owen. Blair didn't realize she was crying until her tears dotted the edge of the paper. She held the note close, pressing it to her chest like it could steady the pounding in her heart. She hadn't been trying to leave him or Rosie, but maybe she'd been running from a fear too big to name. That night, under a quilt of silence, Blair sat by her window. She traced the spine of one of the printed books, flipping slowly through the pages. Her own drawings looked back at her bold and alive. At 11:07 p.m., she picked up the phone. When Owen answered, his voice was soft, cautious. Blair. She didn't speak at first, just listened to the way he said her name like it meant something. Finally, she said quietly but clearly, "You didn't fix me." Owen didn't answer. "You didn't try to rescue me or pity me. You never once looked at me like I was broken." Her throat tightened. "You made me feel whole, Owen. And that's different." There was silence. Then his voice, low, rough, honest. "I miss you. I miss you too. I don't care where you live," he added. "I don't care what city you paint in or how far you roll. Just tell me there's still a place for us somewhere in your story." Blair closed her eyes. "I think," she whispered, "I think the next page starts here." The gallery was buzzing with warmth and light. Outside, families gathered, children clutching colorful books, their eyes wide with wonder. Inside, along the pristine white walls, Blair Whitmore's world had come alive. Pages from her picture books framed like windows into magic. Brave girls in wheelchairs flew with butterflies. Forests danced with light. The dragons had names. The endings were soft and bright. Owen Callahan stood just outside the front window holding Rosie's hand. The little girl, now 6, wore her favorite pink dress and sparkly shoes. She was practically bouncing. "Is she nervous?" Rosie asked, peeking in through the glass. "Maybe a little," Owen said, kneeling beside her. "Big nights can feel a little scary, but I think she's also really proud." Rosie grinned. "Can I go see her now? Let's give her one more minute." But before Owen could finish the sentence, the front doors opened. And there she was, Blair. She wore a soft cream dress and a scarf with tiny watercolor birds printed on it. Her long blonde hair was pinned half up, a hint of shimmer near her eyes. Her chair had a tiny flower tucked into the side wheel, probably Rosie's doing. The moment her eyes landed on them, her entire face lit up. "Rosie!" she called out, arms opening. Rosie didn't wait. She ran full speed, wrapping her arms around Blair with all the joy a child could carry. "You came," Rosie beamed. "Now the books have happy endings like ours." Blair's eyes filled with emotion as she kissed the top of Rosie's head. "You're the reason they do." Owen stepped forward, slower, quieter. But the look in his eyes was as loud as a declaration. She reached out and he took her hand instantly. "You didn't rescue me, Owen," Blair said softly, her voice only for him. "You chose me." Owen's hand tightened gently around hers. "Every single day," he whispered, "forever if you'll let me." She smiled, a real, honest, whole smile. Then came the voice that turned every head in the room. "Can we be a family now?" Rosie asked, clear and proud, standing tall in the center of the gallery. "Like in the books." There was a ripple of laughter, a few soft gasps. Blair's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. She looked at Owen. He nodded hard in his throat, and she nodded back. Applause broke out. Gentle, warm, celebratory. Not for a woman in a wheelchair, not for a single dad with a past, but for a family. Imperfect, unexpected, beautiful. Later, when the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, the three of them sat on the gallery floor, sharing a cupcake Rosie had insisted on saving. Owen leaned his shoulder gently against Blair's. She looked down at Rosie now, leaning drowsily against her leg. "I used to think I lost everything in that accident," Blair murmured. "But maybe I was just finding my way to you." Owen kissed her hair, and Rosie, half asleep, mumbled, "Best book ever." And it was because in this story no one had to be rescued. They simply had to be seen, chosen, loved. Together they were whole. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more powerful emotional journeys just like this one. Hit that hype button to support our storytellers, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder. Love doesn't fix you. It sees you, chooses you, and stays, because sometimes the most broken moments lead to the most beautiful beginnings. And sometimes family is simply the people who choose to stay. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next story.